Hey there. Welcome back to the Limitless Business Online podcast. I'm Tracy Daniel, your online business strategist and coach, and I'm here to help you build a focused, thriving online business without the chaos. In today's pod vlog blog episode, I have been so excited to share this one with you. Here's a question. Be honest. Does AI feel completely overwhelming to you right now? Like you know you should be using it, but you're not sure what to trust, what's hype, whether it's actually saving you time or just creating more work? Yeah, me too. Or at least me before this conversation I'm about to share with you. I sat down with someone who has been working in AI for over 30 years, before most of us even knew what those two letters meant. And I walked away feeling genuinely calm about AI for the first time in a long time. And that's rare. I know I had to share it with you. So today, my guest is Dr. Arshavir Blackwell, a cognitive scientist, AI researcher, and entrepreneur with over 30 years of experience in artificial intelligence, including industry roles at Ask Jeeves, Fox Audience Network, and CitizenNet, acquired by Condé Nast. A former student of neural network pioneers Jeff Elman and Liz Bates at UC San Diego, he now focuses on mechanistic interpretability, the emerging field that reverse engineers how large language models actually think. Arshavir runs two companies, Compliance Labs, which audits fine-tuned AI models for organizations in regulated industries, and Your Voice Craft, a local desktop AI that learns your authentic voice through weight retraining, not prompting, and runs entirely on your machine so you have full data privacy. Through his multi-channel series called Inside the Black Box, he translates cutting-edge AI research into vivid human terms, which we all need. And he's the author of The Creative Agency's Guide to AI, which is available on Amazon. You'll find the links to his book, his podcast, his newsletter, and both of his apps in our show notes. In this episode, we talk about why AI isn't scary or as magical as some people are claiming today, what the future of AI really looks like for entrepreneurs like you and me, and what you can do right now to start using it more authentically in your business. This one is a must listen. Let it calm your nerves about AI, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's dive in. Arshavir, thank you for being here. AI is everywhere right now, and so is the overwhelm that comes with it. And today I'm talking with someone who has literally been working in AI. If you remember, it stands for artificial intelligence. He's been working with AI since before most of us knew what it was. Arshavir Blackwell, welcome to the Limitless Business Online
Thank
podcast.
you. I am very pleased to be here.
I'm very excited to have you.
Thank you.
With that little brief intro, I'm finding, I wanted to start here, that I'm finding AI extremely overwhelming for me and for a lot of
Yeah,
solopreneurs, small business owners, online business owners.
right.
And
I think a lot of people are.
I found your and my conversation, our conversation when we first met,
Mhm.
so like a breath of fresh air, just so
Oh,
relieving
good.
to ease some of that overwhelm and confusion, especially with your vast experience with AI.
Mhm.
So, can you talk us through a little introduction and in your background and in you with
Sure.
AI? And what can you share with us to help us feel more at ease about
I would be
AI?
happy to do that. So, as we were discussing before the show started, my background is I got my doctorate at UC San Diego, which was a big hotbed of this kind of technology starting in the 90s. And I worked with two of the pioneers in the field, Jeff Elman, who developed some of the pioneering neural networks that even today versions of them are still used. And then Elizabeth Bates, who was a linguist who used a lot of psycholinguist, really, who used a lot of theories about language that were very compatible with what we were seeing with neural networks. So what we're calling AI today really is just neural networks. There have been AI has taken on many forms throughout the years. In the 70s, it was more traditional kind of symbolic, good old-fashioned AI, they call it. But what people are referring to as artificial intelligence now is mostly things like large language models and transformers and AI video kinds of tools that you see out there like Sora. And so that's basically the space I work in, especially the language space. After my doctorate, I worked at a series, mostly startups, some larger companies as well, of places that were trying to get neural network, what we were calling still back then, neural network technology, out and into the mainstream of corporate production code. And that was very difficult to do because there was a lot of pushback. A lot of people were still uncertain of this technology. They didn't believe in it. It was mysterious to them. They didn't understand how it worked. So why would they want to use it? And there were some good points and bad points. It was definitely a challenge to get some people on board. And then about 10 years ago, neural networks saw this huge resurgence. And what we're seeing now with AI and large language models in particular, like ChatGPT and Claude, which like everybody is using now, is that they're incredibly useful at doing a lot of very human-like tasks. They've basically digested the entire internet. So in some sense, it's like a search plus. We're used to using search where you type in a keyword or a question and it gives you a page of results. But this is one step further because it actually goes out and summarizes the results for you and gives it to you in one unified place so that you don't have to search for 10 or 15 different pages and knit things together yourself. And that's, I think, one of the most powerful things about the technology. So now everyone is talking about it. There's huge amounts of money going into it. It's very popular, but there's also, I think, there are two things to be careful of that I would have people keep in mind. One is there's always a hype cycle and people overhype stuff. And the risk of a hype cycle, even with powerful technology, and this is very powerful technology, is that people get overexcited and then they lose interest when the hype cycle breaks. The sort of other side of that is the existential risk that AI is going to kill us all. And I think that's very unlikely. I don't really see these systems as being sufficiently powerful to destroy humanity, which is what I've heard some people say. They
Wow.
do have a lot of power and but they're tools. And essentially they're, till at the end of the day, these are tools that human beings are using. If there's any sort of negative consequence to it, it's what the human being is doing with it. So that there may be some risk there, but I think that the incredible potential in terms of medicine, drug finding, the legal area, all sorts of different areas, scientific research, where this technology is now being applied really outweigh, I think, what are essentially pretty small risks for people. That's my view.
Yeah. Yeah. I would totally agree with that. I One of the questions I wanted to ask you was what do you anticipate the future being like with AI? Because I know we talked
Yeah.
about how we are human beings and we evolve over time. What would you say to that? What is your anticipation, or what do you think is
Well,
going to be
I'm
future?
always very cautious when predicting the future of any sort of technology because there's just so many possible paths it can take. Right now, many people, and this tends to be my view, many people believe that the models and the capabilities we're seeing right now are just the beginning of what's going to be down the road. And if we look at what was possible just a few years ago versus what you can do with these models now, and essentially you can code entire programs using something like Claude or ChatGPT or some equivalent of it without having to touch any code personally. Now, the problem is that sometimes the results are not exactly as good as you would want. So, one possibility is that trajectory is going to continue until basically coding will be, to put it one way, a completely solved problem. So it will not only code your application for you so that you don't have to know or touch any code, but it will also do all the checks and make sure that it's actually running.
Mhm.
Right now, the problem with a lot of these systems is you do have to monitor them closely. So my sister actually just sent me an example of this, that there was a legal brief filed that had been generated by an LLM, and it had a lot of false information in it. And I told her, this happens all the time. You have to check your work. So these are not systems where you can just push a button and have it go and just out into the world and prepare whatever it's
Yeah.
doing. And so that I think is going to be a problem for a long time. And I think people need to be aware that when they're using these technologies, they need to check their work. And I'm actually surprised at how often people will use Claude or ChatGPT or something like that to produce a product like a writing product or a work product or code and not actually go through and check it and make sure it's correct.
Mhm.
So I think that will be, while I predict that's going to be a problem for a while, I think the problem will probably get easier over time. Beyond that, it's so hard to predict because you can have in technology these huge sort of hockey puck like increases and then things can bottom out, but then you can have an increase and then more of an increase and then more of an increase. And I think most people are betting on that, but only time is going to tell us what these machines are going to look like five
Sure.
years down the road.
Yeah.
I think the bigger change that you're going to see, excuse me, the bigger change that you're going to see is going to be in the human acceptance side of it. So right now, people are hugely afraid and skeptical of AI. And I think it's like the early days of search and the internet. And what you're going to see in the next 5 years, I think this is a little bit more certain of a prediction. What you're going to see is that it's going to become much more integrated into society. People are going to just say, oh, yeah, I checked ChatGPT, I checked Claude, I checked whatever system they're using. Just like now, it's considered normal to go to a web page and check something and to do a search on Google. And we don't really, 25, 30 years ago, that was a big deal. And not
Sure.
everybody
Yeah.
had that technology. But now, think of how even something as simple as driving somewhere has been completely transformed by GPS and the iPhone. And I think in our day-to-day lives, even if the technology doesn't progress that much farther beyond where it is now, which I don't think is going to happen, even where it's at right now is going to be it's going to be a huge change in human society. And I'm not even sure how that's going to parcel out because it's so hard
Yeah.
to predict exactly. Who knew social media would have the effect on our society that it does? When it first came out, it just seemed, oh, some kids were online and it was cute. And now it's like just completely transformative. So I think it's going to be difficult to predict exactly where the transformation lies society, but it's going to be there.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I know you mentioned when we met the first time was about driving cars that
Yes,
we couldn't imagine driving 10 minutes somewhere.
exactly. I think that's right. Yeah. And the thing is that I think that we're all going to be stuck with so much leisure time that we're not going to know what to do with ourselves. I think
Mhm.
that's always been false with new technology. This goes back even to the 50s where they showed these magic automatic kitchens and then everyone ran out to play tennis while the food cooked itself. And that never actually happened. And the reason it doesn't happen is because people get used to a new standard with the new technology, and they don't try to do the same things they were doing before with the new technology. They try
Yeah.
to do more. And so
Yeah.
if you think about what your computer does, you do so much more in terms of banking and shopping and all sorts of other kinds of things that you would never have even attempted to do before you had a computer and internet
Mhm.
connection. And that was my car analogy, was that before the car, people just going around town, that was a full day's work. But it's not like when the car was invented, people only had 10 or 20-minute trips to make
Yeah.
because now they're going to the next town or the next city or even the next state in the same day because they can. And that was the point I was making with that. I think that that's
Yeah.
going to be a big factor in what with this. So not so much extra leisure time, but you're going to see a huge amount of new productive work come about with the same amount of effort.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We are going to evolve and adapt and use it in ways to further work. I believe we were
Exactly.
created as humans. God created us for work and for
Yeah.
innovation, and so it will become a tool to advance work, and we'll keep
Yes.
working. We're
And
not
we'll
just
keep
going to
working.
sit
Exactly.
down
And then
and
admittedly, there's going to be some churn because there will be jobs that will become almost obsolete, and it's going to be difficult because you'll have to find people to fill new roles and you'll have to retrain people. So I'm not saying it's going to be without effort,
Sure, yeah.
But I think that if you look at the history of technology, assuming it's going to be the same this time as it's been in the past, then I think that we're going to be okay in the
Yeah, I know you mentioned a second ago about developers, and I was
yeah,
like, yeah, that's a hard developers, copywriters, it's a hard
yeah,
place for them right now, especially.
yeah,
But they are going to evolve and figure out new ways to use their skills with the
yeah,
AI. My
yeah,
husband was just telling me about his colleague who created this amazing app in a week's time that
yeah,
2 or 3 years ago would have taken a year for a whole development
exactly.
team.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
he's a developer and he's figuring out how
yeah.
to keep doing what he loves with the tools. Mhm.
Exactly. And I think the developers will still be important because they have to make sure that this code is actually doing what it's supposed to do. But it's interesting that you mentioned copywriting because I've actually developed a tool, and I think we talked about this called
Mhm.
Your Voice Craft.
Yeah.
Is it yourvoicecraft.ai? And that's actually a tool that's designed to write copy, but in your own voice. I think that another issue that a lot of people have had with AI is that it all sounds the same. You type in, write me an ad to do thus, and I have a friend who has a digital agency. We've talked a lot about this. And he uses ChatGPT and Claude a lot in his work, but he's told me, yeah, the problem is it's very hard to get it to produce text that doesn't where every ad doesn't sound pretty much like the other ad. And you can do a little
Mhm.
bit with prompting, but there's only so much you can do with what the prompt says and how that guides the output. And so what we do is we actually take samples of your real ad copy text and on a local secure machine, so things aren't wandering around on the internet because people are very concerned about digital assets going out to Claude or going out to ChatGPT. So that's one thing we're very careful about. It's all local. And it's basically like it takes the scent of your ad copy like a dog, and it learns from that how to produce ad copy in your voice. And I think we're going to see a lot more applications in that space doing that kind of thing because local LLMs, which are basically large language models where you're not typing something in and it's going out over the wire to Claude or ChatGPT and potentially getting hacked.
Mhm.
Local ones are the machines where they're just actually right there. The application is right there on your machine, and nothing ever has to leave your machine in order to do the processing that you need to have done. So I think actually to answer your earlier question about what's coming up next, I think you're going to see in the next couple years, maybe even less, local LLMs are going to become much more of a thing because people are worried about security. They're worried about cost too. People get these huge bills from ChatGPT for their usage. And when you use a local LLM, all the processing, all the compute is done on your personal machine.
Mhm.
So you don't have to worry about that cost factor. So cost and security, I think, are the two big advantages of that. So forgot
Yeah.
about that one. That's another one I see coming up in the future.
Very cool. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I know we talked about it's your voice craft,
Your
right?
voice craft, all one word, .ai. And the idea
Yeah.
is for it to use your voice to craft whatever kind of ad copy you want, and it will work. It says, do you want LinkedIn? Do you want Facebook? And it also tunes it for whatever digital marketing target and so that's something that's in development right now. And I'm working, as I said, with a friend of mine in digital marketing.
Is
So,
it
and I
just for ads or for all types of copy?
It's for ad copy right now. For digital marketing and ad copy is what
Mhm.
it's good for. But you could repurpose it, and we have thoughts about how you might use it for there's local LLMs where they're right on your machine, have huge benefits. One is in the medical profession, you have all these HIPAA concerns.
Mhm.
And so the privacy and security issues that you have with digital marketing are even greater in health
Mm.
and in legal as well. We're thinking of eventually branching out into those as well because those all have big security concerns that using a local LLM helps to circumvent.
Yeah. So I'm just learning about using Claude and work, and
Yeah.
Cowork is on your machine. So is that
Yes.
a local model or
No.
no?
That is not local. So what Claude Cowork does, so Claude, you're typing something in and it's going out to the network and the cloud, and Claude basically is processing it on its cloud servers and it's coming back to you. So it's not air gapped. There is that security hole there. What co-work does is it allows you to store information locally on your machine in a folder that you specify Claude has access to.
Mhm.
And then Claude uses that essentially as a extended memory for your work. And it's
Okay.
extremely powerful because it can do things like edit spreadsheets. So for example, for your podcast, what it can do, you can just say to Claude in natural language, start a spreadsheet that tracks all of the podcasts that I have scheduled, as well as who the guests are, what the topics are, so on and so forth. So you don't have to set the spreadsheet up yourself. You don't have to figure out the best way to put the various cells in there.
Mhm.
Just tell it what you want to do. It will back it with a spreadsheet of its own. And then what will happen is if you want to say, hey, who do I have coming up in the next week? It'll access that spreadsheet, but it will give you real natural language responses to your question. So it's basically like having a super intelligent assistant that you can just type in questions to. And I use it for a lot of things. It's extremely powerful. I put actually all my personal health notes in there and it
Mhm.
reads everything. And then it can say, I would suggest that you ask your doctor this question next time you go and see him. This test indicates this. You might want to consider getting an additional test to check this other thing. And
Yeah.
it's really sophisticated. And so all my files are in there. It can read them all. Some people have concerns about the security of it going over the
Mhm.
wire, which is a personal issue. You have to decide how
Yeah.
much of your personal information. So the stuff that's in your folder does not go out into the cloud, but any sort of queries that you're asking but through Claude or through ChatGPT, those are going out. So it's really an issue of how comfortable do I feel doing that. But it's a
Okay.
really powerful. I use it for basically everything I do now. So, and I
Wow.
think you'll see more people doing that because of that
But
memory thing.
yeah, it is powerful, and that's why my
Yeah.
brain is overwhelmed, I think. But
Yeah.
for the small business entrepreneur, the small team entrepreneur, with as far as copy goes or other parts of their business, it's not secure like your voice craft is,
No,
right?
it's not. So again, the folders and the files themselves should be secure on your machine, but anytime you ask it a question that involves any sort of information, that information is going out over the wire and it could be used for training, it could be
Mhm.
intercepted. It's really not clear exactly what's happening to that. I guess for people, my suggestion for people that are just starting out is I actually tend to prefer Claude to ChatGPT. I think it's a little better, and I think it's like a lot of what they're doing in terms of research more. I would say for someone just starting out, just start using Claude. You don't even have to download it if you don't want to. You can just go to claude.ai
Mhm.
and there's just a little screen and you just ask questions and it will give you natural language responses. And I think that once people start consistently using it, they will begin to get the feel for what it's good at and what it's not good at. And that it's very easily biased, for example. So if you say, read this article, I think it's really terrible. What do you think? It'll probably tend to agree with your assessment. If you say, read this article, I think it's really great. What do you think? So it's a little bit of a sycophant. And that's a problem with all of these models right now, is that they're designed to keep you engaged as long as possible. And so the best way to keep you engaged as long as possible is to agree with you. And it's people saying, oh, Claude said X, Y, or Z to me that this idea that I had is really great. But the problem is they haven't really stress tested what they're giving
Good
it.
point.
And so my suggestion would be once people start using Claude, you can do things like give me if you have an idea, say, I want you to evaluate this idea, and it comes back with, oh, it's the best idea I've ever heard. You should definitely you'll make millions. Have it instead say, and those things happen. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not making that up. Say to it something like, red team this idea. Give me what the worst possible outcomes of this idea are. Or another trick is it writes very fluently. The
Mhm.
problem with that is that fluent writing can bias humans to thinking. So when something's well written, we think it must be true. And a lot of what it does is it can write things that really aren't true or consistent, but it writes them so well that we
Right.
immediately think, and it's a very hard thing for us to keep from falling into because it's such an automatic pattern for humans to say, oh, this is so well written. He makes these points. He's got these sources. This must all be true. So another thing you can do is to tell it to write it really terribly or
Mm.
to take what it says and rewrite it yourself, but very coarsely. And
Mhm.
see then, as you're rewriting it in your own words, if it still makes sense to you, it's
Mm.
actually being suggested to you, or whether the conversation or whether the idea starts to break down because you say, oh God, now that I'm writing it myself, this doesn't really make sense. So it's definitely powerful, but I would say to new users, really don't just believe everything it says. You really need to stress test it.
Yeah, for sure. And for online business owners, I've seen this happening with
Yeah.
coaching clients where they'll say, well, I was chatting with ChatGPT and it said I should do this and this. And it's the same thing. Or I should do this, sell this idea.
Right.
And the next step is, okay, let's talk to people then. Let's get the human in the loop,
Yes,
talk to real
exactly.
people to see this is actually true.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. That's what you have to do. I wrote a couple papers about that on Substack called Fluency as Validity. And basically, the idea was the central theme was that things that sound fluent and well written, as I've said, come across as being very valid. And that's exactly what you're seeing with your clients, is they're seeing something that's very well written by ChatGPT or Claude, and they're immediately ready to run out and do it. And you really have to red team those things and find all of the sort of potential downsides and negatives. And Claude can actually do that for you, which is the cool thing. You can tell it, like, no, give me all the bad aspects of this, and it will
Okay.
do that. It will tear
Yeah.
apart. But that's the thing, is it will do whatever you tell it to do. So if you bias it to do something positive, it will be positive. If you bias it to do something negative, it will be negative. So in that sense, it's not like a human being. It doesn't have a firm, consistent point of view from session to session. It's just going off the statistics of what you're saying.
Okay. Would you say some people say that you train your AI or you teach it? Do
Yeah.
you feel that or you have all this 40 years of knowledge in
Yeah.
AI? Is it actually learning about us or who we are or how we like things?
I think what it's trained on, so what is called training is in with neural networks, simply as you have for the language case, you have huge volumes of data. And these data are sent to an algorithm, and the algorithm is trained to predict what the next word in the text is going to be. And then it's
Mhm.
told whether or not then it was correct or not. And that's the whole algorithm. So basically, to put it in really simple terms, it's a autocomplete, but it's becomes when you use it at that scale with that many input items, literally billions and billions of input items, it becomes
Mhm.
a lot more than just a fancy autocomplete. So is it doing the same thing as humans do? I would say no. It's not learning about us, but it is learning about human biases and about things about us from the language in the learning corpus that you're giving it.
Okay.
So it's a sort of an indirect learning, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
say it's like it's not alive, it's not conscious, it's not learning things about how people feel, it's not feeling anything. It's just basically very often what happens when you hit one of these cloud systems, it's not even from query to query the same computer because there's load balancing and things get sent all over the place. And so
Mhm.
really it's just a very fancy, expensive vector computation, which is just a vector, is just a whole bunch of numbers thrown together.
Okay.
So in that sense, it's very convincingly alive in some ways, but it's not alive. So
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
does that help?
Yeah, for
You know,
sure. Because I think a lot of people are falling into a trap, so to speak,
yes,
that they
yeah,
think it is real or that it
right.
has a brain, that it's actually learning and it's still just basically a robot. It's learning what
Yeah.
you give it.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's not learning from what you put into it. So when you type in things to Claude, it does not change its responses and train itself based on the information that you're giving it. It has a fixed set of what it knows and what it's going to do. And it's always going to provide you with the same answers, no matter how many times you say some other thing. So the only thing that's going to change is your input will change how the output comes out, but it's not changing how it's processing that output, if that makes sense. Now, with what I was talking about, there is actually some further training, and that's because it's a local model and you can train local models. And
For the
that
your
actually
voice
does
craft.
it, yeah, with your voice growth, and that actually does change the dynamics of the model itself
Okay.
somewhat. And I've been doing with a colleague of mine a lot of studies of what exactly is going on inside the machine. It's really quite interesting. The European Union actually has an act coming up that is in August, I believe, where you have to, if you're using AI for a critical function, you
Mhm.
actually have to prove that it's basically that it's safe. And it's not even clear how they're going to do that, but
Yeah.
that's coming up very soon. So there are a lot of companies and places and legal firms and so forth that are scrambling to figure out how can we vet our AI as being safe and
Yeah.
okay to use. So that's another issue is not thinking that it's conscious, not trusting it too much, and also just in general being concerned about the safety of it.
Mm.
Is it going to give you some completely wrong answer that you're going to rely upon?
Yeah. So that's that all of that is leading me to think about authenticity
Yeah,
and like even the writing, if it's too good,
yes,
you want to tell it to not be so good. Is it
exactly.
possible to say, write this like you're a third grader?
Yes, absolutely. You can do that. And the problem is that you can only do so there's two ways to do that. One way is to do it in the prompt, which is the thing that you type that it sees and that it responds to. That will have some positive impact and it will give you somewhat of what you want. But if you really want to change it at a sort of gut level, you need to do the fine tuning, which is what we do, which is the thing with the local LLM. And that's because it actually changed. So it's kind of the difference between giving someone instructions to write something in a certain way and hoping that they're able to do that as best as possible, and actually retraining someone to write with a
Mhm.
particular style.
Yeah.
And we've done this in a lot of our experiments. We've actually trained it, let's say, to write ad copy, or there are various, we did the philosopher Seneca, we did
Mhm.
the philosopher, uh, who else did we do? I think Marcus Aurelius.
Okay.
And what we did was we didn't say write like Marcus Aurelius. We actually trained it locally on Marcus Aurelius. And then the outputs that came out were much more like the kinds of things that you would see written in those kinds of texts. The training part is it's not training if you're doing it in the cloud ChatGPT thing. But if you really want authenticity, I think you probably chances are you're going to have to use a local model because
Mhm.
that's a model that you'll be able to fine tune yourself. That's what it's called, fine tuning.
Yeah, and fine-tuning as a human, like you said earlier,
Yeah,
proofreading, refining, putting your spin on things.
exactly.
The sad thing for people who are really great writers,
Yeah,
I have a friend who is having to do a lot of writing for his national teacher boards,
yeah,
and he was very worried because they said, "We're gonna run this through an AI
yeah,
checker," and he ran his writing through some checker he found. He doesn't know if
yeah.
it's the same one that they're using, but it said this could be AI, and he said he didn't use any AI, and he was like, "Now
No,
I have to make
yeah.
it not as
That's
good," and he's an English
yeah,
teacher, and I was
yeah,
like, "Oh my goodness, what's
yeah.
happening?"
No, that's unfortunately that's very common. And basically, I'm not aware of any of those AI checkers that actually work. I know there was one case where someone ran the Constitution through an AI checker and it came up as being AI.
Oh.
Just ridiculous stuff like that. And unfortunately, I've heard of so many examples of, for example, students and like your friend being caught up by being told, oh, this was written by AI. And they say, no, it wasn't. And you really have no way to prove otherwise,
Mhm,
unfortunately.
yeah.
And it's one of those kind of common beliefs that you can check and see if something is AI that really don't bear out what is actually the truth of the matter, unfortunately. But I don't know what the answer to that is, because if people are going to use them, you can't, how do you, I guess you could fight it and you can say, I wrote this.
Right.
This is
Well,
not,
and
your checker is wrong. That's
yeah.
all you can do.
Yeah, you said that was it in Europe where they're going to start requiring
Yeah, I think they're going to do it here too, but in Europe as
yeah.
well, they're going to require people's AI. And that's a little bit different of a matter. That's not so much AI authenticity. That's just making sure that if you're using an AI to do X, Y, or Z, that it actually does what you're claiming that it does,
Oh,
and
but
then sort of unintended consequences.
yeah, and I have seen some people starting to say this was written with the help of AI, like
Yes,
being
yes,
authentic in that way to
yes,
be
yes,
upfront. Yeah, I
yes.
used AI, but it's still my voice. And
Yeah. But the
so
point is,
maybe
you
we'll
don't
start to,
really know how, when they say this was written with AI, like how much did you have it check it? Did you, like, that could mean so many different things,
yeah.
that it still is. And my thought on that is, you don't say this was written with Microsoft Word. You don't
Well,
say I
right.
used spell check to make sure all the, and I guess my feeling about it is I'm interested in reading things that are well written and helpful to me. And if they're well written and helpful, why would I be so worried about what the origin of it was? If you gave me one thing that was well written and useful to me, and another thing on the same subject that was really not very useful, I would pick the useful thing. And if you then said the useful thing was written by AI and the other one was written by a human, I'd say, I don't care that,
Yeah,
the
right.
thing that you said was written by AI was actually much better. And to me, that's really much more the point, is that you want to produce a product and you want to vet. So that's where checking it comes in, because you do have to check. But if you've used AI a lot and you've checked it and it's a better product, then I guess my feeling is great. Then
Yeah.
use it. I want to see the better article. I don't want to see a bad article.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. And I love that line of thinking too. Sometimes people feel ashamed or
Yes,
they get shamed because they used AI. And
exactly.
it, you're right. Oh, I used a spell checker so that there wouldn't be misspellings. We wouldn't
Yeah. And
shame
I think,
anybody for that.
and that's one of the things that I meant when I was saying the sociological changes that are going to come about, because I think that we're going to have sort of a decision, a group decision about what constitutes fair use of AI. And it's
Mhm.
going to go back to, I think a lot of, we've forgotten about it now, but I'm sure that when computers first came out, I'm using a spell checker. Isn't that cheating? Or I'm using a web browser and a search engine. Isn't that violating people's privacy to
Mhm.
index their web pages if they haven't asked me to do that, and then have that available to anybody who wants to go there? And those were all real questions, I think, that people had at one point, and we've forgotten that we used to think that, or even caller ID. We don't
Yeah.
even think about it anymore. But I remember very vividly, there were a huge number of people that were very anti-caller ID because of the privacy concerns.
Sure. Yeah.
And now, now Apple has it so that if their caller ID isn't working, it makes them tell you who they are before they will even connect you. So
Yeah.
how about that, right? So it's
Right.
like, that's how far we've come in expecting to know who it is that's calling us before we pick up the phone.
Yeah.
So, there'll probably be a discussion about that, and probably people will get a little bit more relaxed about it in the future, I hope.
Sure. Yeah, those are great examples. Is
Yeah.
there anything else, Arshavir, that you think misconceptions you think people need to understand, or anything else you'd want us to know as online business owners,
Yeah.
about AI?
I think just think of, my advice would be mostly what I've already said, which is this is a very useful tool. I know a lot of people who are using it in their businesses, and they find it to be a huge win in terms of getting much more work done and being much more productive. And that has certainly been my experience.
Mhm.
But it's only a tool. It's not alive. It's not conscious. It's not going to destroy you. And it's not perfect. So, again, don't just take something that AI has generated for you and pass it around as being a finished product. Go through and very carefully check everything that's there and make sure that it makes sense to what it is you're trying to achieve. And just play with the technology. I think the more people actually use Claude, the more they'll get a sense for its strengths and its weaknesses, and the better they'll be at using it, because they'll be like, oh, that's really not a good thing for Claude to be doing. This is a good thing for Claude to be doing, or ChatGPT, or whatever you're using.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my final advice to people is just use it and don't be scared of it because it's
That's
great stuff. You can get a lot done with it.
that's great advice, and I think super helpful because I think I always say I love software that helps to make our
Yeah.
businesses more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I always say the best way to learn the software is to use it. And the
Exactly.
best way to learn AI is to use it and not be afraid.
Yes.
You can always just stop if you don't like
Yes,
it.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
It's
So
not gonna
that's
hurt you, it's not gonna destroy your creativity, it's not gonna zap your brain or anything like that, and I've heard people who make some pretty extraordinary negative claims about it, and again, it's just a tool, so use it appropriately.
yeah, awesome. So where can our listeners learn more about your voice craft and follow you to learn
Sure.
more about AI and how you're seeing things evolve?
Yourvoicecraft.ai is a link that they can go to, and then when the product is ready to go, they can give me their email on that page, and when it's
Okay.
ready to go, I can give them a link to download it. I also have a Substack, which is probably another good place. It's called Inside the Black Box, all one word, .ai,
Okay.
and that's a Substack newsletter that I publish every week talking about various issues having to do with how these things actually work. So
Awesome.
those would be the 2, I think the 2 major places. And
Yeah, great.
I also have I do a podcast version of the newsletter, and that's also Inside the Black Box, cracking the AI code, and so they can find that on Spotify or Apple or what have you. If they some people prefer listening to reading.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Great. Thank you for sharing those links. I'll be sure to put
Thank
them in
you.
our show notes
Great.
so
Thank you.
everybody can follow you and stay in the know with someone who knows what's
Yeah.
really happening.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, joining the
Thank you.
podcast.
Yes, I loved it. This was very fun.
Yeah, it's been really fun for me, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
I'll be following along on your Substack too.